6.3, estimating with percent. So we're not going to have exact answers. Some of us might have a little different than others. Our objective here is to estimate percents. So let's first see what a percent is as a fraction, which is what we did in the last section. 1/10 or 10% can be written as 10 over 100 and reduced to 1/10. 20% we know is 20 out of 100, which can be reduced to 1/5. 25 over 100 can be reduced to 1 over 4. 33 1/3% is the same thing as saying 1/3. 50% is 1/2. And 66 2/3. Notice if you add 33 1/3 to 33 1/3, you'll get 66 2/3. So instead of having 1/3, you now have 2/3. So using fractions to estimate percents. In this first one, we have 48% of 79, and we want to find out what that is. Well, one thing that we can do is we can actually round our numbers. And so this is like saying 50%. Well, 50% is like 1/2. So we have 1/2 of means multiplication. Instead of 79, since we're rounding, let's round this up to something easy. Let's round it up to 80. So half of 80 is 40. So estimating wise, 48% of 79 is roughly 40, or is about 40. Notice I use the about symbol. So 27% of 63. I would round this, since 25 is a lot easier to do, 25%, which is like saying 1/4 of is multiplication again. 1/4 of what? Okay, 1/4 of, instead of doing 63, let's do 60. One of the reasons I chose 60 is because I know that I can break it up into quarters. So half would be 30, and then break that up in a half, and we'd have 15. So 15, 4 15s make 60. So 1/4 of 60 is roughly 15. You could choose different numbers, that's fine too, but this is just kind of a rough estimate of how you could do it really easily. Example 2, it says Cam Sports is offering 20% off a basketball that costs $19.99. So they're saying 20% off, $16.99. Nope, $19.99. The same basketball costs $14.99 at Hoops Haven. Which store offers the better deal? First, let's look at this in easy numbers. So let's do 20, and let's do 15. So we want 20% off. That means we're taking something away. Well, what is 20%? 20% we said we can write as 1/5. So what is 1/5 of 20? Well, that's breaking it up into 5 ways. So break it up 5 ways and you get 4. So we're taking $4 off. So if we're taking $4 off, that means we're going to subtract 4. And we're going to end up at $16. So that's telling me that even with the sale price, Hoops Haven is the better deal. Okay. Now let's look at something else. Another way to eliminate percents is to find 1% or 10% of a number. You can do this by moving the decimal point in the number. I also threw in 5%, and we could also do 20% because of the way 10% works. So to find 1% of something, so say we have 45, 1%, we take our decimal, move one place, and we get 4.5. If we want 10%, we're going to move our decimal 2 places to get 0.5%. I was saying that backwards. Let me say that again. Okay. Still got to find 1% and 10% of 45. So to find 10%, we divide it by 10. One way you can see that. Well, 10 can't go into 4, but it can go into 45. So add my decimal. Can go in there 4 times. We get 40. Bring down our 5. Add a 0. Bring it down. Well, 10 goes into 50 5 times, so we get 4.5. So what we're doing is moving our decimal one place for 10% to get 4.5. To get 1%, we're making it even smaller, so we'd have to move our decimal one more place, so 0.45 is what we would get. And what I said about 5% or 20%, well, you can find 5% by taking half of 10%. So half of 10%, or half of 4.5 will be 2.25. Or you could find 20%. You can find 20% by multiplying 10% by 2. So if I multiply by 2, I get 9. So in example 3 says find 3% of 59. Well, first let's look at this as 3%. Instead of 59, let's do 60. So something you can see here is 3% is made up of 1%, 1%, and 1%. What's 1% of 60? Move my decimal 2 places to the left and I get 6. 6. And then 6. Add those all together. I get 3% equals 18. What about 18% of 45? Well, on this, I would take 20% and minus 1% to get 19, and minus 1% to get 18. Of course, you can do it different ways. This is just one. So first I have to find 20%. So I find 10% at 4.5. I multiply times 2, and I get 9 minus 1%. Move that decimal one more place, 0.045. Something I notice here, this is like saying 0.5 and 0.5 almost. It's like saying a half, like 50 cents. So really I'm subtracting 1. So 8 minus a half minus another half, or 9 minus a half gives me 8. So it's approximately 8 because of the way I did mine. The book actually did 20% of 45, which would have just been what we did at the beginning, and that's how we got 9. So really, as you can tell, you can have a couple different answers for these. Example 4 says Eric and Selena spent $25.85. I'm going to write that down. $25.85 for their meals at a restaurant. About how much money should they leave for a 15% tip? So to find a tip at a restaurant, for 15, I'm going to do 10 plus 5. Well, 10 means I'm going to move my decimal. First, I'm going to look at this as 26. I'm going to round it up, and I'm going to move my decimal one place. So I'd have 2.6 here. I want 5%, which means I'm going to have to divide this by 2. 26 divided by 2 is 13. And since this is 2.6, you'll have that decimal in the middle for 1.3. Add these together, you get 3.9, or approximately $4, as a 15% tip. Our homework is on page 346. We're going to do 11 through 28, starting with number 11. It says use a fraction to estimate the percent of each number. So we have 8% of 261. Well, 8% is very similar to 10%. And I'm going to say of 260. So now I'm estimating. This is like saying 1 over 10 times 260. So this is 260 divided by 10. My decimal one place is 10%. So we have 26 is approximately our answer here.